Outsider Report on the Coalition Radio. For those newly joining the program, my name is Irina Zuckerman, and I'm the editor-in-chief of the Washington Outsider. Today with us, we have Hillel Almeida. He is a cyber maven, an experienced operative analyst, and he is someone who's actually made a very interesting comment recently on I-24, which actually inspired this program, and it had to do with the recent operation that was presumed to be of Israeli extraction, involving the infamous pagers blowing up all over Hezbollah land in Lebanon and beyond Lebanon, actually in Syria and Iraq as well. We'll be talking about all of this and delving into the operation, which seems to be a little bit mysterious in various ways, and there's been a lot of questions about what happened, why it happened in that way, what's to expect in the future, and who is really behind it. Thank you, Hillel, for joining us today. Before we get into all of that, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and why you decided to come out with this explosive statement about the moles allegedly handling the acquisition of those pagers?
Thank you for having me, actually. So as you said, I'm kind of a cybersecurity expert. More precisely, my expertise is in the field of information operation and narrative dissemination, all the kind of disinformation. And obviously, Oslo, I am a political analyst for I-24 News, but not only. I have bylines in, of course, the Times of Israel, in Ynet, Jerusalem Post, and so many other. Mainly my analyses are in French because I was born and raised in Paris, but I came in Israel kind of 12 years ago. And since then, I'm like really I focus my expertise on cyber operation of Israel, and the counterterrorism strategy that Israel enabled, let's say, on its territory and on the Arab world.
Thank you so much for that introduction. And in you, I find a kindred spirit, because while I'm not a technical expert from a policy and communications perspective, and information warfare and information operations is something that are part of my professional focus as well. So I can relate to the excitement in that area. So let's look at the big picture concerning all of this. There are, as we know, reports widely attribute the attack on Hezbollah to Israeli intelligence, and the reports right now include at least 12 anonymous members of Israeli intelligence and law enforcement who spoke to the New York Times on record. They also include some U.S. officials who confirmed some extent of Israeli involvement. And all of that is linked to a few shell corporations, like the Hungarian licensee BAC, that allegedly were involved in manufacturing the pagers that then went on to explode in Lebanon. And we know that Israel has had a record of building up both the shell companies, actually do most intelligence agencies, and fake infrastructure. The most famous intel up involving the famous Red Sea resort. In this case, this reporting, unusually detailed and unusually open about Israel's alleged involvement, seems to understate the complexity that it took to get this whole thing handled. So I'm curious to understand, what is the connection among all these shell companies, and frankly, are any of them really behind the manufacturing of that product? And if not, how did it get to Taiwan? Does Gold Apollo, the original company that granted BAC license for manufacturing those types of pagers, is it aware of what was transpiring? Have they been completely duped? Where does it put us in terms of international relations between the whoever put in the original order and the legitimate entities that have been at the forefront of media discussions and interviews?
So let's start from the beginning about the complexity of the operation. The operation was way more complex than what we are aware right now. And I don't think we will have all the details of this operation before like the next 30, 40, 50 years. I know that in Israel, like declassifying this kind of information takes 50 years. So I do think that in 50 years, we'll have the final word of all this operation, but we might have as a starting point the Syrian war, and more especially the post-Daesh war in Syria, where Hezbollah actually helped the Bashar al-Assad forces on Syrian soil on behalf of Iranian regime. So since this date, which is around like 2017, like the end of 2016, early 2017, when Hezbollah helped Bashar al-Assad regime, they sent a lot of combatants on Syrian soil, weakening actually the like Hezbollah organization. And because of that, and because of the fact that their combatants were like on Syrian soil and lost their life, like they actually did war against the rebels for the count of the Iranian regime, of the Bashar al-Assad regime, and etc. They had to open up, let's say, the organization to other. To understand a bit more Hezbollah, how it's like, worked, it was like, created in like the 70s, 80s, in the form that we know right now. And it's more or less worked as a sect more than a terrorist organization. So of course it's a terrorist organization, but it really worked as a family terrorist organization. It was kind of artisanal terrorism, where only people that knew, like, that were in this family, in this group of Shiite family, could enter into the Hezbollah. So it's worked like that. But with the Syrian war and the fact that they lost a lot of people in this war, they had to open up, like, let's say, the recruitment process to others, to Sunni Arabs, which I do think was the weakened part of their strategy to open up, because like that Sunni people, which we know that they are not necessarily in favor of Israel, but at least they are for like some kind of a regional peace under the Saudi Arabia leadership. And so their interests could fit actually Israeli interest. So Israel might have recruited some people in the Sunni Arabs that were recruited by Hezbollah. They could have even like sent agent there, undercover agent, of course. And it took like at least 8 years to put it up, like a lot of people, a lot of agents into Hezbollah, and bring them to some position that will allow them to order those pages. But that's like, the first part on how complex it was. On the long term, even like, we speak about an operation that started at least 5 years ago. It didn't started last year. So we need to have that in mind. And it took like, more than the time. It had to take a lot of agent, a lot of infiltrated agent into the Hezbollah, infiltrated agent in Lebanon, even like, that doesn't have any connection with the Hezbollah, or they are not inside the terrorist movement. And of course, like, a lot of organization inside Israel, and to have the political actually agreement to conduct this kind of operation, and like, to agree months after months, if we continue this kind of operation, if we allowing that, if we are going in this way and not in another. So it's really something that we're like way more complex than what we can see right now. So for the first part. For the second part about all the companies, structure and everything, it was actually what I read, not only online, but like I have sources that told me here in Israel, it was actually easier than it looks. When we speak about like, companies and everything, they made up companies online. The Hezbollah in their paranoia, actually missed a lot of details, and missed the most important of all the process in this kind of like, movement. It's the OPSEC process. The OPSEC procedures, which is like operational security, ensure any organization, which is companies, like companies, states, even terrorist organization, like everyone should follow like simple process to ensure the security of their data, of their operation, and of their information. But they miss that by not doing the correct investigation and the due diligence behind those companies, allowing the Mossad actually, let's say the word, we all know that the Mossad is behind that, and even if they are not telling the world that they are behind the pager operation, it is likely Israel that is behind, knowing the following event that's happening right now, like the war and everything. Because there is like, beside of Israel, there is only 2 or 3 states in the world able to conduct this kind of operation on Lebanese soil, which is UK, USA, or France. Like, there is no other states or other power in the world, like there is no other organization powerful enough to conduct this kind of operation. And knowing that, so the Mossad, let's say, just built up like fake companies. Like, there is a journalist that went, like, 5 days ago to the address of one of the Hungarian company, and it was actually in a house. It's like, they made up everything, but they made it like with precision. They really built like, deep cover avatars, showing like the real, like, manufacturing and with people that could work there. So the Hezbollah just did the first step of the due diligence and say, okay, fine, we trust the guy that bring us those companies. We see that, like, there is a company on LinkedIn with like 5 or 6 workers. Fine, let's order from there, without doing like actual investigation and in-depth due diligence to like check if the companies that sold those pager were actually legitimate. And thankfully, because, like, we need to point that beside all of this, because of that, because of these mistakes of the Hezbollah, and because the lack of OPSEC procedure in their own organization, it allowed to, like, warn the thousands of terrorists to know their organigram, actually, to build a real organigram of the Hezbollah terrorists, which allowed actually all the attacks of Israel. And it's not only attacks that they do, like, like that, they're blowing up a building. They are like doing targeted attacks to like top level and top tier people in the Hezbollah, to weaken the organization as much as possible, to reduce the Iranian influence in the region, and to reduce Hezbollah influence in Lebanon and obviously on the border. So we need, like, it's all this background that we need to have in mind to understand a bit more like the operation that were conducted by Israel.
So what about the Taiwan link? How was Gold Apollo involved in granting a license to a fictitious company? And the pages actually did transit to Taiwan. So if they were not coming from any of those fake registered places, where were they coming from? And how was it that no one traced their origin in terms of simply trajectory?
We don't know if like the pager like transited through Tehran or anything. What we are sure of, it's like they transited from Bulgaria and Hungary to Lebanon directly. That's what we know, and because of that, we understand a bit more that the twist were there in Hungarian, like, in Hungary, where like apparently Israeli agents modified the pager itself to put like a small explosive in it. And actually, when you saw like the videos of the explosion, we see that it's like really tiny explosion that meant only to hurt the people that hold the pager, and not the people around, and not the people, like, they could have put like a bit more of explosive to blow up like a bit more of people, but they really put the minimal like gram of explosive inside this pager to wound only those people. And I do think, but that's only my assumption and my thoughts, that this operation was more about knowing more about the Hezbollah, to create some kind of destabilization of the movement. Of course, it destabilized their communication, the way of communicate between them, and etc. But it allowed them to understand a bit more about the organization itself, to understand who is, like, who lead in this operation, where they are located, who are their family. By doing that, because those people went to hospitals and actually dropped, again, all the OPSEC procedure, meaning they took smartphone, they went to hospital without like masking their face, without hiding themselves. They went home. So they like actually went under the spotlight of all the cameras that there is in Lebanon, allowing security services, not only Israeli one, actually Western security services, to identify specifically all those terrorists. The fact that the Iranian ambassador had a pager was, I do think, a surprise. I don't think that anyone was aware that the Iranian ambassador would have a pager, because this is like, it's leading seriously to the connivance between Hezbollah and Iran. Even if we know it, having that proof, having the proof that the Iranian ambassador had a pager, or one of his like security member had a pager, show a real connivance and a real relationship between Iran and Hezbollah on a daily basis, and not only on the strategical one, not only on the diplomatical one. It's not like, we are friends, I'm taking news from you and you take news from me and what's up and everything. No, here we are like seeing that on the daily operation, on the daily policy that Hezbollah, actually put in action in Lebanon, we see that Iranians are involved in it. And it's not a small, it's not something that we should put aside. It's something really important to have in mind, and which is more interesting in all this kind of operation. It's not what people say. It's actually what people don't say. It's what, what is silenced on the media. So when you say, you see an Iranian ambassador was wounded, but you didn't heard anything else, anything from the Iranian authorities, anything from the international community about that, it should be a huge diplomatical issue. It's like an ambassador, but it was silenced totally. And it's been actually a week now, like we are, the 24th, Tuesday 24, it was a week that he was wounded. And since then, there is nothing. So always, and I do think that the people that listen to us would be interested into that. Don't look about what the media says, look about what they don't say, what they silence and what they put aside. This is where the information is. This is where you should be aware of something. I don't say going into the plotting stuff and all that. It's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that in this kind of operation where secret services, diplomacy are involved in, of course, military and everything, sometimes the interest of some people is willingly put aside to let some other operation being to have the green light on other operation. And on that more, we see today that it's Tuesday, that it's only on Tuesday, the 6th day of the war, that the international community says something about the war. They say something, they said, oh, Israel should everyone should stay calm. We don't want that to go and to escalate. It's interesting to see that for these 5 last days, no one say anything beside of Macron, but that's another issue. But no one says anything. Saudi Arabia. Iran says some stuff, but it wasn't that much sensitive. And all the rest of the international community stays silent. And that means something. We are in presence of a terrorist organization that actually killed more than 200 American soldiers 40 years ago, more than 55 French soldiers again 40 years ago, did a lot of attacks in Paris by the time. It's a terrorist organization that actually people look at it and are worried, in the international community, of course, and states in general are worried about, because they are part of the global dawah and the global jihad that is actually destabilizing destabilize the world order more than anything else. Daesh was taken care of because of the attacks of Paris in 2015. because of the Hezbollah didn't do any attack the last 20 years outside of Israel or outside of Lebanon, the international community didn't felt, let's say, legitimate enough to act against them. And there is more than that, the issue of the political branch and the military one, which like the states, for instance, and designate the Hezbollah as a whole as a terrorist organization, but France do the difference. European Union in general do the difference, but Germany don't do.
But
So
I'm going to interject into
yes,
that because 4 years ago, at the United Nations General Assembly gathering, which is going on currently, King Salman of Saudi Arabia actually called for the international community to disarm the Hezbollah. If Hezbollah is not a threat to anyone but Israel, why would he make such a statement on that level? He didn't send his foreign ministers to say that. He didn't send MBS to say it. He said it himself. So if Hezbollah is not a threat to the region, why did he make a statement calling for it to be disarmed?
Hezbollah is anyway a threat for the region, and everyone knows that. But beside that, there is like other interest. Hezbollah again is not only a terrorist organization, is actually part of Lebanon and is today, let's say, the kingmaker on the Lebanese political scene. They have the final word on who to choose as a prime minister. Today, the presidential election in Lebanon are held into the hand of Hezbollah because Hezbollah doesn't want to see a Christian president. So Lebanese politics are really, really complicated due to all the ethnicities that there is in presence there. So that we can say without any issue that it's because of colonization and the Sykes-Picot agreement by the time that dealt just with like a pencil and a paper and say like the border is here and that's all. This one of the causes of the issue that actually we see right now in Lebanon. And Hezbollah on the political scene in Lebanon, they hold a lot of stuff. People and international community in their whole have more issue to deal with like a movement that hold the country on the legitimate, that they have some kind of legitimacy in their country rather than terrorist organization like Al-Qaeda or Daesh that just go into some territory, conquer everything and want to start caliphate from there. It's not the way that the Hezbollah did. Actually, Hezbollah had the same strategy that the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. Like they wanted to they integrate the society from a political perspective and in parallel on a terrorist perspective and with terrorist components. So they play on both sides and it gave the consequence of it, it's like it gave how to say that it's more about the whole consequences that we see right now and that we saw the last 20 years is the inefficacy of democracies to deal with of the power of Europe and the States to deal with this kind of movement. What do? If you have those democratical value, Hezbollah were elected, but because democracies and Western democracies has a reading of the world order that stopped in the Cold War, they don't understand that you can't deal with this kind of organization in the same way that you deal with extremist parties in Europe. You don't deal with Hezbollah like you deal with the far right or the far left in France. It's not you can't compare it. Of course, far right and far left needs to be fighting on the value, on the moral, and on their ideological, vector that they and the path that they want for the society to take. Of course, they need to be fought on those on those spheres. But on the other side, terrorist organization needs to be fought to we need to fight terrorist organization, and especially more than that, we need to fight them on the ideological level And on the ground level, we need, like, you need to dismantle the weapons that Hezbollah have right now. And it's what, like, actually Israel do right now. As, like, you know, we speak, I saw that more than 1,600 Hezbollah targets were eaten by by IDF the last, like, you know, 5 days, which is incredible. Like, and this is all that is because of the pager operation again.
So speaking, going back to the pagers, you mentioned that Hezbollah made a lot of mistakes in failing to do due diligence, but nevertheless, even considering all that, it takes a lot to convince someone to buy your product if you're not a well-known company. So much less to get a terrorist organization that is all about trust issues and known trust relationships in business as well as in politics to sell your product to them. So how did the Israeli manufacturers of those pagers manage to create this sense of legitimacy that made them, that made Hezbollah at least consider them?
I do think that it's the more simple, that it's like really the most simple part of the operation. Having someone to have the legitimacy to order pages, we take them the year, like, you know, the years that we spoke. It's been 8 years that we infiltrate the Hezbollah, let's say. I see really someone that just, like, you know, started as a simple soldier, simple, like, you know, combatant of Hezbollah, and just, like, you know, go up and go up and go up in their, like, you know, in the hierarchy, and then being, like, you know, was being appointed as the one that was in charge to buy pages, let's say. This part of the operation, it's really like the most simple one in the way, even like how to build a company. It's really easy today, like, you know, to just open up a few LinkedIn accounts to create a company, start that, like, you know, 3-4 years ago, like that. They don't have like enough, they don't have too much suspicion on, like, you know, is it a new company or isn't it. So really, I see more like a two level of operation, having like someone that just go up and up in the hierarchy of Hezbollah, and in the end, being appointed as the pager manager, and in the other side, creates the, like, all the online infrastructure to make believe the Hezbollah, those companies are legitimate. More than that, we need to add on this discussion something that is really interesting: the choice of Nasrallah to move from smartphone to pager was taken a year and a half ago, when some people, like, told Nasrallah that Israeli services created a new software able to spy on the people and to spy through smartphone, activate the camera, activate the microphone without anyone being, like, aware of that. Knowing that, I do think, and that's only, again, my thought, but we can think about the fact that Israeli just, like, let some whispers coming to Nasrallah that they actually had this kind of software, which is true or which is fake. We don't know, and it's not actually the point. The point is the fact that Nasrallah believed into it and started to consider an alternative to the smartphone. And what did this thought is all about, like, you know, let's go back to the 80s, let's use, like, pager. No one can break a pager, and because, like, you know, it's radio emission or this kind of, like, technicity, which is not super interesting. But let's use, like, pagers and talkie-walkie. It will be way more complicated for Israeli authorities to actually break those those materials.
So this is what I don't understand something here from a technical perspective, because regardless of that specific quote-unquote new software, Israel has plenty of other real forms of cyber surveillance that have been known and in the market for many years. Why did Hezbollah only start getting worried about potential tracking about this software? I would think if I were a terrorist I would assume that there is all kinds of spyware whose capabilities are not known, but which is even more dangerous than what is known. Why did they need for that rumor to start to take those measures?
It's like, in the end, there is always people that, like, this kind of organization have actually serious and intelligent people, people that they know well about, like they're speaking about. They have like cyber experts, they have like a cyber security one, they have like technical experts. They are not like just like a small organization in like, in on the like under some trees and like thinking about how destroying Israel. They are like, a high level and high quality terrorist organization, and they know what they do. Um, I do think that by the time they had like materials to like, not being spied by
Mhm.
like seen by Israel. And they just like it's more about, in this case, I do think it's more about an information operation and psychological operation that Israel held against the Hezbollah that helped Israel putting in place the pager operation. Because if you have like the final and the big pictures, if you're Israel and you know that already you want to you want to you want to sell them pages for like,
Mhm.
selling them and etc. If you have that in mind, it will be like way much easier for Israel just like to convince Nasrallah and Hezbollah leadership in general that they have a superpower to spy them all. And beside of all the security measures that they took, beside the fact that their smartphone are like super secure, because today we know that the smartphone that we use are not the smartphone that are used by the secret services or terrorist organization. Like there is like specific like OS that can be like unbreakable, which is not true because everything is breakable, but
Mhm.
more difficult to break, let's say. So they have all these kind of tools. They just like Israel just let them understand in a way that they could break they have break their security layers, and now they can spy them all, and it would be preferable for them to move to any like, a totally
Mhm.
different technology, which is a pages one. And if you have like 2 or 3 infiltrated agents, advisor of Nasrallah, that like, whisper him to the heel, like, look, maybe it will be preferable to have like some pages. We can see like that some kind of a path of what path they took and why they choose pages in the end. But again, we will know that only, I think, in like a few years.
So that actually leads me to this question about the moles. You mentioned that the mole was handling this pager acquisition, but we also saw in the aftermath that there were multiple types of equipment compromised, walkie-talkies, other types of equipment. Does that mean that there were multiple actually new acquisitions made on par with the on par with the pager order? Because so far everyone was only talking about the pagers. No one was talking about the walkie-talkies or the radios that were compromised. Does that mean that the moles on the ground were the ones who were planting explosives in those devices that were not necessarily new?
I think the pagers were like the majority of the operation were focused on the pager, and they had backup how do I say that? They had backup ideas with talkie-walkies and like the finger security one. They just like, put some explosive in any other like materials, having an idea of if like this operation failed, we have like a backup operation to do. That's like, it's not even, I don't think it's even relevant in the event. Like it gave them more surprise, but it wasn't that much. It was like few talkie, few radio here and there.
Mhm.
Speak about like, a few hundreds of material that were
So
like
we're not talking about a massive new order
yeah,
to
it
happen.
wasn't a massive. Pager was massive. Pager like wounded more than like 6,000 of people. Like so at least 4 or 5,000 people had pagers on themselves. So this is a massive operation. The second one, I do think, was a backup one, and it helped Israel to locate a bit more, like, terrorists, or to cross-check some information that they wanted to have the next day. But it's not the one that was actually the most interesting for the intelligence.
But does that mean that you had multiple, well, not you specifically you, but Israel had multiple moles who were responsible for different aspects for it? Or was one, pager convincer, one advisor was responsible for the entire thing? Would
Oh,
it,
definitely.
yeah,
Definitely.
because it doesn't
Network
sound like
of
one person could have handled all of that without drawing suspicion.
Yeah, we don't speak about one agent or one infiltrated agent or one corrupted terrorist. We speak about a network of people, and we know that, like, we need to understand as well that Hezbollah is not that famous in Lebanon. We are not like in 2000, in 2005, they could have some kind of fame there. Here, like now, we are like 4 years after the Beirut explosion, which we all have suspicion of Hezbollah implication in it, and a lot of, like, proof, or, like, partial proof lead us to the fact that it was maybe a Hezbollah weapon storage that exploded in Beirut. Since this day, Lebanon was actually, it's Lebanon that exploded in the same time than Beirut. The life in Lebanon is actually really, really complicated right now. People that could have, like, avoided all the issues, and because, like, they have money and they have privileges and everything, all those people, like, from day one to day two, lost everything. Like, the prices went up. The infrastructure in Lebanon, just, like, they are not working anymore. It's really complicated when you're Lebanese now to, like, do some commerce with the rest of the world, and etc. and extra. Since 2000, like, not since 2020, but like 2020 incident exaggerated all that. And Hezbollah is not famous at all. So I do see, like, a network of people that just infiltrated Hezbollah, that started to work with Israel and to be in contact with Israeli agents inside Hezbollah to actually, just, like, take up more and more place, and taking some space into the Hezbollah leadership, creating, like, all the noise that we know right now, and having, like, an impact on the organization there itself, and on the decision that the organization took.
So let's talk more about some of these intelligence failures, the fact that there was a massive counterintelligence failures. First of all, we are hearing that supposedly Hezbollah executed the alleged agents, but then again, they would say that regardless of whether they caught anybody or not. But what it is signaling is that there might be a mole or witch hunt inside Hezbollah. In a recent article, you also discussed the internal Hezbollah structural weaknesses that were being exploited by this operation and the preceding preparations for it. So it sounds to me that Hezbollah, which is seen as the right arm of Iran in Lebanon, its most fearsome weapon, may be a little bit of a paper tiger in some ways. Can we kind of delve into what that means and why that is the case?
Look, I don't think that right now Hezbollah can do, like, a witch hunt at all. They don't have time. IDF don't let them to have time to do the witch hunt. Of course, they will do it, and let's say, for the camera, they will execute people even if they don't have any tie with Israel. It's like, here we are more about, like, really information operation itself, into the world, like, we found the traitors, we killed them, and it's a terrorist organization. They don't care about who they kill. What, like, the only thing that matters for them, it's the end goal, and the end goal is, like, ruling over Lebanon, killing, like, destroying Israel, and then in the future, like, doing jihad, and, like, taking like, doing jihad against the Western countries, and putting the Sharia law all over the world. That's their end goal. So knowing that and knowing how absolute they have in their in the pursuit of this ideology and these objectives, they don't care about if they kill Ahmed or Mohammed, and it's small sacrifice that they will do. So that's one thing about the witch hunt. Then about the organization and the organigram of the organization themselves. We spoke earlier about the fact that the pager operation led all the operative and the combatant of the organization to relieve themselves, to reveal themselves into the hospitals and to take phones and that, plus all the intelligence that secret services gathered with the years and years, just cross-check everything. And it's like a puzzle. It's in the end, you're you have the puzzle in front of you, and you don't know where this piece goes. And you know that if you have this piece, how the puzzle just appears in front of you. And with this operation, it's what happened. They had this final just piece that they put in a correct place that helped them to put all the rest and to see the the picture in the end and say, whoa, okay, so now we know this guy, the red one forces are there, and they are the leader is this guy, but he's held by him, and him. Okay, we know where they are, we know where they are located, we know how many missiles they have, the security checks that they are around them. Okay, this branch of the Hezbollah, this branch, and this branch. And now it's what we see. Because of that and all this information that we're just gather in less than 48 hours, Israel had an immense, huge opportunity, and they use it actually. They use these windows of opportunity to weaken all the Hezbollah forces and infrastructure all in once. And they are running out of time. Let's be honest. They are really, really running out of time. We see right now that Iranian starts to speak with USA to deal of ceasefire. And not ceasefire for them, but they are trying to speak about the nuclear deal and say, okay, maybe our condition is a bit exaggerated. Let's say if we can bring these people more like the IEA going into further into our nuclear program and stuff like that. So Iranian regime starts right now to freaking up and to say, okay, maybe we went a bit too far. Hezbollah starts it started to negotiate a ceasefire because they need a slow time to to wake up a bit and to put all together their forces to understand a bit more where actually they were eaten. Because right now, knowing that they don't have correct communication, and and for the audience to understand, Hezbollah wasn't able to touch the south, central parts of Israel. They couldn't touch Jerusalem. They couldn't touch Tel Aviv. They hit only Haifa was the 1,000 point what they hit, but they couldn't hit more. And we knew by the time that a month ago, Hezbollah was at more than 150,000 missiles, 17 or 20 soil air defense. They had really a lot, a huge arsenal that was able to go up to Elat, and they couldn't use it because right now they are totally disorganized. They don't know where to put their hair. They don't know where to put their eyes, or in the left, or in the south of Lebanon, in Beirut, in the north. They are totally disorganized, and IDF hit all strategically and surgically, all the point where there is missiles and hard, let's say, weapon that is that targets Israel. So we can when you see the big pictures, it's actually a marathon that Israel run, and now it's the marathon that Israel run turns into a more a sprint, and they are going they have, I think, few days left in this operation, but they want really to use those days to hit as much as possible Hezbollah infrastructure, to reduce and weaken the organization at the point that it was 20 years ago.
So here's the question. Speaking of paranoia, there are now rumors that Raisi, who died in a weather-related helicopter crash, allegedly had a similar pager. Is there any truth to that story? And if there is, wouldn't that further support the exact integration of Iran with Hezbollah communications? And wouldn't that also, when you're talking about, the president of the country, not just some ambassador, and it also raises questions: to what extent was Iran in on Hezbollah, on Nasrallah's decision to substitute for the pager? Wouldn't Nasrallah need approval for that from Iran if Iran was integrated into that system on any level, whether ambassadorial or presidential?
The fact that Raisi would have a pager is, I don't think, I don't see that that's relevant. To be honest, the death of Raisi, for my thought and my sources and like a lot of people, is more about like an internal fight over politics in Iran rather than like,
Mhm.
uh, an Israeli implication into the death of Raisi. It was like, it was too weird, the fact that like, Raisi was killed in Azerbaijan, that is known to be an Israeli ally. It was like too many things that like led us to think that Israel didn't had any connection to that. And I think that if Israel had any implication, international community wouldn't be like, so naive,
Oh,
let's
no,
say.
no, I'm not saying that Israel was connected to his death. I'm talking about
No, no, I
specifically
know.
the fact of him having a pager that is tied into that communicate. I don't think a pager would have caused a crash
No,
anyway.
no, no, no.
That
I
is
don't
more,
think
yeah.
like and I don't think that the pager would explode and it was like,
Yeah, yeah. No,
although
no,
like
no. The fact of him having this, being part of this communication system and having Iran integrated into this communication with Hezbollah, if he did have one of those pages, does that mean that Iran had to have approved Nasrallah's decision to switch
no,
to
because
that
like
system?
the Hezbollah is more independent than we think. Like, of
Mm-hmm.
course, they have like
Mm-hmm.
links with the Iranian regime, but they have their own, like we said, they have their own legitimacy
So
in
on the tactical level, they basically
even
make
on a
their own
tactical
decisions.
level. I don't think that Iranian had any like decision to
Mhm.
make instead of Hezbollah. Hezbollah can choose what communication to choose. Maybe the material that they choose to communicate with Iranian regime should have been chosen like bilaterally, certainly.
Mhm.
But I don't think they would have like any link with that or like any involvement into the choose
Sure.
of
Mhm.
it's like Iranian regime is too high level, like they are on the strategical level with Hezbollah. They are not on the tactical
Mhm.
level. Like that's more for the operative and the mid-level management, let's say, if we can say that, of the Hezbollah, rather than really like Iranian implications, saying like, okay, we should use the pages. And we saw that with the Iranian ambassador. Like no one in Iran had a pager. Like few people, RGC, but like it was people that actually was in connection with Hezbollah. No one else had the pages. You don't see like the chief of RGC to have the pager or the president or any minister. So it's more about like Hezbollah internal decision than a bilateral one.
Given that our codes from RGC is the entity that specifically generally deals with Hezbollah, does that mean that the ambassador, like many of his colleagues around the world, was actually an undercover Al-Quds operative and not just a regular diplomat? And we've heard stories of that in the Vienna network, the Algeria operation between the so-called ambassador and Hezbollah. Which caused Morocco to break relations with Iran. Was this guy also some sort of an IRGC operative or intelligence operative and not just a regular political diplomat?
Certainly, it was certainly like an operative and an agent, but
Mhm.
like I won't say that all the diplomats in the world are agent of their own country, but they are.
Mhm.
There are like sources of intelligence that they could
Sure.
gather. Of course, like when like the spokesperson of any ambassador of any embassy in the world, or like the diplomat that deals with like communication or anything, hear something in a restaurant, like a journalist say that, and someone else like answer to him that should like have link with the government, with any government, of course they will go back to the embassy and speak with the ambassador, and the ambassador will do like some kind of report. Okay, we hear that and that, and we may believe that this information can be reliable. So all the diplomats are more or less agent of their own country. The thing what we should see right now, and especially with terrorist organization and dictatorships countries, is the fact that their diplomats are trained for that. They are trained more than democracy, and the separation that there is with democracy between diplomats and agents are not there is not that kind of separation, and it's the function melted like between them, which which is totally different from let's say a French diplomat that hears something and does a report. So of course Iranian diplomats are involved into intelligence gathering, and I do think they are a few of them are totally intelligence agents. So yes.
Yeah, that's actually an important point. I think a lot of people are a little bit naive about Iranian diplomacy and foreign policy, and they sometimes make a distinction between Iranian intelligence and operations and their diplomatic and political activity that may not exist as much.
Yeah.
But here's, as you correctly pointed out, this incident further underscored the close relationship between Iran and Hezbollah. Does that mean that Iranian intelligence networks, and not just Hezbollah, were also compromised as a result of the pager operation?
Yeah, of course, some Iranian networks were totally compromised with this operation. It's not only the Hezbollah, and I would say more even. I do think that there is Russian networks that were compromised too, and some of other terrorist organizations that we don't speak, but there is part of Daesh in Lebanon, even if they are fighting with Hezbollah. But I do think that there is a lot of networks that were compromised, and now they need to rebuild from scratch. Or even some kind of connection with the Syrian regime, even if we know them and we know that Hezbollah and Bashar al-Assad regime working together, but some of the networks that they are working together, or the cells that actually are the bilateral cells, were totally compromised. So this page operation didn't just hit Hezbollah. It was like a domino, you hit the first one and the strongest one, and all the rest just falling apart.
Well, I think that's another point that the media does not report about the integration of the networks between first of all, assorted terrorists, and then assorted state actors, and assorted state actors and non-state actors, and terrorists. I think we tend to treat those issues as separate far more than we should, and I think maybe our counter-terrorism strategy could benefit from integration with our conventional intelligence gathering against state actors, because we've treated those two issues as separate for too long. But then we've had 9/11, then we've had the invasion of Ukraine, we've had the terrorist attacks on October 7th, and meanwhile a lot of these failures are due to not being able to developing completely distinct strategies and not being able to move with the times. But those operatives clearly are doing exactly that. So this actually brings me to another important point. Speaking of integration, the reach of the operation went far beyond Lebanon into Syria and even Iraq. How can we evaluate the damage to Hezbollah networks aside from its original tactic against Israel specifically that we are witnessing today? How can Iran, that is, on a strategic level, managing these networks, compensate for those losses? And how quickly could Hezbollah restore its capacity, including communications?
I would say that Hezbollah would take it would take them years and years and years to rebuild the organization themselves. it doesn't mean that they are not dangerous anymore. And this is important to point. Like, we really need to point out that point, to point out this detail. Hezbollah is really dangerous and still dangerous. I saw some reports saying that we destroy half of their weapon and storage, but I don't think it's true. We hit a lot of them, but we didn't hit that much, uh, because, like, Hezbollah really used whole Lebanon, like, Lebanon soil to disperse and dispatch the weapons, and it will be like a long-term operation to really dismantle everything. I do think that the strategy right now is to weaken them and weaken their communication and all the hierarchy. More than that, it was like a slow, like, killing, doing like target killing to the leadership and isolating Nasrallah. Because right now, Nasrallah, I think that they have like one or two advisor and a lieutenant left. Like the 3 or 4 of his lieutenants were totally killed, and all the, like, the mid-level management were wounded, killed, or is not operative anymore due to, like, Israeli operation or the Page operation. So I do think it will take them years to restructure, like, to rebuild all the structure and the infrastructure themselves. They are still dangerous because they still have the power to launch missiles and rockets, and we still see that today and last night, and it's been a week that we see that they still have the capacity of doing it. But to rebuild the trust and the communication within the organization, it will take them years, and which bought Israel some time to create a new counter terrorism strategy on the Hezbollah and Lebanese, like, border.
So, in fact, this operation was described by some Arab social media commentators as an electronic Hiroshima, which I personally love. I love the description. But that raises a question. Are similar operations feasible against other Iranian proxies? And also, why has Hezbollah, I understand that they were sort of pushed into it, but given that they adopted this unique pager system, why hasn't Hamas, Houthis, and other Iranian proxies done the same thing, seeing that, there is a signal from Hezbollah that there's some, Israeli super surveillance software after that?
I don't think that there is like an organization that is as much dangerous as Hezbollah for Israel right now that could involve this kind of operation for the Israeli services. The position of Hezbollah is really unique in the region. Even if the Houthis are some kind of like Iranian proxy that is against Israel, the threat that they poses is completely different. Like, we speak about ballistic missiles, we are not like they are themselves into war with Yemenites and other, like, groups in their own country. There is Saudi Arabia, so it's completely different. And Houthis are like, a small level of threat for Israel, even if they attack one or twice, but it's something that is manageable, and it doesn't require from Israel to be completely involved into that. In contrary to the Hezbollah, which was like an actual threat, and like, the level of threat just increased from the 7th of October until now, knowing that, like, Hezbollah just hit Israel day after day. Every day I went to the north, like a few times in Metula, in Kiryat Shmona, and actually you can see like Hezbollah, you were able to see, I don't know if we can see them anymore, but we're able to see, like, on the border, Hezbollah operative being there with, like, the launchers of the rockets and, like, the towers that they did under the eye, actually, of the final, which is the UN organization that is supposed to keep the peace between Israel, like, not the peace, but the ceasefire that were between Israel and Lebanon, which was never respected by Hezbollah. So I don't think this kind of operation will be repeating in the future. The uniqueness of the operation is actually what they seek, I think, what Israeli services seek. It's a slow more than the operation themselves. Like the other outcome is like, don't mess with us.
Mhm.
Don't mess with us. You see what we are able to achieve. To do target killing on thousands and thousands of terrorists in the same time, just through like a small devices. So it's really like showing the world, be careful. We have resource, and because we have nowhere else to go in the on Earth, we need to be resourceful. So be careful if you want to mess with us. We just want to live on our land peacefully. Even if you don't want to be friends with us, we don't care. Like, it's actually what Israel say. We don't care. Live like, alongside us. We don't need to have like connection. We don't need to have diplomatic relation. It will be better if we have, but just like leave us alone. We'll like live in peace. You'll live in peace. And that's all. We won't like, we won't say you hi. We won't try to do anything. But if you start to threat us, if you start like to eat us, and Israel is, let's say, not like take his time before responding to rockets.
Mhm.
We need to say that. It's important to say that. It take like, Israel leave the time to the counterpart, saying that, okay, fine, we do everything we need to like, protect our citizen. We put Iron Dome, we develop other technology to protect ourselves. If you eat us like smallly here and there, fine, we won't like go after you completely if you eat us. But if you start to mess with us, so we'll go, and we won't like, there won't be any limits in the killing of terrorists, and we'll do everything. And actually, what's Oslo Israel said to the world right now, it's like, we are going after terrorists. We don't go after civilians. We really want to protect them because we know in what situation they are. We know how difficult it is for Lebanese people, let's say here, or even like, Palestinian, to live under the rule of terrorist organization. Because they are threatening us and they are threatening you, we are doing the job for the both of us. So it's really the outcome of all this operation is like, it's so diverse and so complex that there will be like hours and hours to speak about, really.
To what extent is an operation like that is replicable by other actors in completely different contexts? Not necessarily Israel against proxies, because as you said, the element of surprise won't be there anymore and it's predictable, but by other, advanced intelligence agencies against their adversaries. The reason I'm asking this question, because personally I think it's highly unlikely in the near future, precisely because it takes such a long time to develop, and precisely because it's sort of expected now. But there is now a whole host of very organized campaigners on social media and elsewhere, analysts and so forth, claiming that this operation opened a can of worms. Now, some of them are outright ignorant about the technical details of how the operation was conducted, but others, I think, are deliberately trying to kind of scaremonger and claim that China can do this to the US, or this country can do it to somebody else. So they're kind of rolling up the sentiment that that now common appliances like cell phones or medical pages can be weaponized and turned against whoever. To what extent, what should be the answer to such people?
Uh, I don't think like, bringing the answer will be more like, let's rephrase that. I think in 1 week everyone will forget about that. The uniqueness of like this operation is more about the fact that Israel doesn't have any other choice, because they know that if they don't win the war, if they don't win against the terrorist organization that surround Israel, they will just die and we will all disappear. They had to like, build this kind of operation. I do think that other government and other agency might do something similar. I don't think they will, because they are not in the same situation. There is no other, let's say, democracy that's surrounded by this kind of enemies beside of Ukraine right now.
Mhm.
Uh, Ukraine is only like, surrounded on one of its borders, not against
Mhm.
like, all these borders, which is completely different from Israel. But I don't like, right now they're like, and even like it was some people like few days ago that integrated themselves on everything. Actually, it's a good question to ask, and it will like, raise really awareness among the population on all the operational security that they could like, um, uh, build in their own company, in their personal life and everything. It's a good outcome, but I don't think it will remain in the civilian, thought and in the audience in general, and everyone like, it would be seen as, I think it would be seen as like a successful operation, and the negative outcome of like, should I buy that, should I not buy this device, would have the effect of like, just raising the awareness among people.
Well, to what extent? I agree with you that for the intelligence agencies, this may not make much sense. But imagine a terrorist organization wanting to kill random people and taking over basically cell phone stores in various parts of the world and basically lacing random cell phones with explosives and then exploding them to mass massacre regular people. Is that a high likelihood?
No, no, I don't think so. Like, we are not speaking about like cell phones that like, it wasn't like pages that were bought like in some single shops. It were like, like, and it was the issue. If the Hezbollah wanted to secure themselves, they should have done that, but they didn't. They went to some like, manufacturer that like, provide them X amount of pager from the same like,
Mhm.
from the manufacturer and everything. So there is not even like a danger or threat on that, like buying something that like could have an explosive in it. So really, I don't think there is any issue on the matter at all.
But a bigger question here is more general. I mean, disruption of supply chains, which is one of the main issues that led to the success of this operation, is an effective method of at least
No,
tactical.
no, there is no disruption of like, the supply chain, because they were the supply chain.
That's true.
It's
But
not. It's not even like. It's not like the agent went to Samsung to like, to add some explosive into all the chain of pagers.
Mhm,
They were actually, they bought like, pagers.
mhm,
It made believe the Hezbollah that they were like, the one manufacturing them,
mhm.
but they weren't. And they just like put it explosive in it, and they sold that to Hezbollah. So there is not even like, it's not even an issue at all. It's not
Sure,
something that,
got
we
it.
could worry
So,
about it.
but can disruption of supply chains be effective in a different operation and context?
I
And if
don't think.
so, why aren't US and other Western intelligence agencies doing so more often with Iran, with Russia, with all the countries that are involved in any international acts of aggression or terrorist organizations involved in sometimes they intercept supply chains like the shipments of contraband or shipments of missiles, but we rarely hear about any successful operations that actually really disrupt supply chains and make it difficult to impossible to continue production of manufacturing of certain types of weapons, for instance, or transfer of contrabands that gets not just arrested but basically blown up at its inception.
No, I don't think it will be used at all, because again, it's the uniqueness of the
Mhm.
situation, the fact that Israel had no choice to be that
Mhm.
much resourceful. Like France doesn't have any interest to like, disrupt the supply chain of Al Qaeda in Africa, uh, because like they would have like, there will be like more positive outcome of doing like other operation of helping like local like, intelligence service differently, rather than just hijacking some supply chain and blowing up
Sure.
everything. We are not speaking about the same threat. The threat of Hezbollah, it was more than real. They hit Israel like, every day since October 7th, and before that
Mhm.
they like, like not every month, but like continuously Israeli soil and threatening Israeli citizen inside their own borders. So because we're not speaking about the same threat, there is not even like, relevancy to speak about like, some kind of like doing some kind of comparison with other like secret services. Even if like Russia is a threat, a real threat to Ukraine, but Ukraine doesn't have time to think about this kind of operation. So that's all. But there is no point. And even like if we speak about Taiwan and China, Taiwan is an island, so it's completely different. They have like other kind of borders. The uniqueness of like this situation made like the operation, it's not the reverse. It's really like the
Interesting.
situation itself that did the operation.
So that brings me to another point that is, again, what you said about what's not being discussed in the media being important. And the one issue that's not being discussed in the media that was kind of highlighted by this operation indirectly is the international corporate support for Hezbollah, meaning the other products and services that Hezbollah purchases from non-Mossad companies on a regular basis. And some of them may be other coming from friendly states, but some of them could be coming from Europe, just like these pages, which in this case happen to be controlled by Israel. But in some cases they may not be. So speaking of this international corporate support for Hezbollah, directly or indirectly, what can we glean from this story? How can we use this situation to kind of highlight the fact that terrorist organizations happen to get international corporate support, and there's not nearly enough pressure to kind of close down these export-import controls?
Uh, I don't think that like, Hezbollah had that much international support. Like all the Western countries and majority of the countries just like condemned Hezbollah, and a few countries supported it. Countries more supported the fact that, of the escalation of like, protecting civilians and everything. But again, they did it only today. They let Israel 7 days to conduct their operation, which is something to notice because like it shows really that the world is aware about what's happening, and they are slow buy as much time as possible for Israel to conduct their operation against the terrorist movement. So we need more to see that rather than there is like some kind of support. And all the support that we see beside of Iran and few other countries were more about like on Lebanese victims there were, because there were some kind of civilian victims, unfortunately, but there is not that much. The ratio actually is really like, low, but it's more about that. So yes.
Do you
I want to like, I really have 1 minute left. I have 1 minute left. After that, I need to run.
Oh,
So
sorry. So
yeah, no,
in case of future things going on, first of all, do you really expect do you expect Hezbollah to relocate some of its fighters from other regions to the Middle East to compensate for their losses?
I don't think that Hezbollah had that much people outside of Syria, like abroad. Like people that there is like in South America, because Hezbollah, more than being a terrorist organization, is a slow criminal organization. They found themselves through cocaine and drugs.
Sure.
Yeah, so that's important to notice. But the people there is like in South America are not operative as we can understand in the way of terrorist movement. They are more like operative. They are like, drug dealers and everything. And they are more Colombian. It's like they are less Lebanese. There is like 1 or 2 Lebanese, but they need those people there. So they won't, bring them to Lebanon. And in Syria, actually, they might call them back, but again, it will be complicated knowing that they don't have any communication network that is operative or like outside of the Israeli site. And more than that, the Bashar al-Assad regime needs those troops too. So they would need to make a choice. We'll see. Actually, we will see that like in the coming days, but I don't think they will call them back, or like they will call them, but not totally.
Finally, one last question to wrap up. Recently, a Palestinian official stated that Israel can expect an October 7th like attack from southern Lebanon, regardless of whether that particular description is accurate. Is Israel expecting a possible retaliatory creative intelligence attack, not just a terrorist attack, but some sort of a creative intelligence operation by Iran with conjunction from other sophisticated, friendly intelligence agencies? Is that something that is credible?
I don't think it's credible, and I don't think that Israel will fail twice on that. The outcome of the October 7th on the Israeli intelligence showed us that they push themselves to show us how wonderful they are, and the page operation is part of that. The shame that they felt, the mistrust that the population had into the intelligence services after the October 7th awake them a bit, I think, and they won't let any other October 7th happen again, knowing that all this, there is like secret services of all over the world in the region. So, and we work closely with the France, UK, USA, Saudi Arabia, and all the intelligence agencies that work together to actually not let that happen. So I don't think it's a plausible scenario.
Well, I'm very glad to hear that despite all the propaganda, that's all it is, just this big talk. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for everyone who's been watching us. We'll be back again next week, 9 p.m. Back here, the Washington Outside Report on the Coalition Radio. And thank you, Hillel, for joining us today.
For you, Irena. Bye.
Bye.